Today we're diving into the presidency of William McKinley. It's an incredible story of power, of prosperity, and of a single shocking moment that completely changed the direction of a nation.
So, picture this. It's the very beginning of the 20th century. President McKinley is riding high, fresh off a big re-election win. Everything's looking up. But as we're about to see, history had a very different plan.
To really get what a big deal his death was, you first have to understand the man himself and the times he lived in. McKinley wasn't just a president, he was the Gilded Age president, a guy who totally embodied the era of big business and industrial power.
I mean, when McKinley took office in '97, the Republican Party wasn't just in control, they were at the absolute peak of their power. They had the White House, a lock on the House, a lock on the Senate, the Democrats were in shambles, and that whole populist movement, yeah, that was pretty much fizzling out. It was total political dominance. And the money behind this operation? Whoa, it was staggering. His 1896 campaign, backed by powerful guys like Mark Hanna, spent $3 million. That was a record-shattering amount of money back then, and it really kicked off this new era where big money played a huge role in politics.
All right, so McKinley has all this power. What's he gonna do with it? Well, he had a very clear, very pro-business economic plan, and that really became the story of his presidency at home.
The bedrock of his whole policy, the absolute non-negotiable, was the gold standard. For the business community, this was everything. It meant a stable, predictable dollar, which was the exact opposite of what the populace, with their calls for silver, wanted. And this really breaks down his 1-2 punch for the economy. First, you get the Dingley Tariff, which jacked up taxes on imported goods to protect American factories. Then, the Currency Act made it official. America was a gold standard country. And you know what? The economy was booming, so these policies were super popular. It kind of papered over some of the other issues bubbling under the surface.
Okay, so that's what's happening at home. But things get really interesting when we look at foreign policy, because this is where McKinley's presidency takes a totally unexpected turn, and, well, an American empire is born.
And here's the crazy part, right? The big irony is that McKinley himself wasn't some gung-ho expansionist. He was a pretty cautious guy. But he was also a brilliant politician, and he could feel the pressure building, this rising tide in the country to flex its muscles on the world stage. That pressure cooker eventually led to the Spanish-American War. You know, the war itself was over in a flash, but the impact? Oh, that was huge. A few quick, decisive victories, and suddenly, the United States had something it had never had before, an overseas empire. This one short war completely changed America's place in the world for the next 100 years. So riding high on all this patriotism, McKinley gets ready for his 1900 re-election campaign. And he makes a choice for his vice president that honestly turns out to be one of the most consequential decisions in American history. He picks the biggest hero of the war, the one and only Theodore Roosevelt. As you'd expect, McKinley and Roosevelt just cruised to victory. It looked like his second term was going to be more of the same: peace, prosperity, success. But it would only last for 6 months.
You almost can't make this up. The place where it all went down couldn't have been more symbolic. He was at the Pan-American Exposition in Buffalo, this massive fair celebrating the exact kind of industrial power and prosperity that his presidency was all about. And this timeline, man, it just shows you the emotional whiplash the entire country went through. On September 6th, he's shot by an anarchist. For the next few days, everyone's on edge, but the news is good. They're saying he's recovering. But it was false hope. An infection took hold, and on September 14th, just 8 days later, William McKinley died.
So you see, this was so much more than just a personal tragedy. The death of this one man was really the death of an entire era in American politics. Because McKinley's death didn't just promote his vice president. It put a man who was his polar opposite in the Oval Office. You had McKinley, the cautious, conservative, business-first guy of the Gilded Age. And then you had Roosevelt, the energetic, bold, trust-busting symbol of the coming progressive era. They were night and day. And let's be super clear here. These two were not buddies. This wasn't a smooth passing of the torch. It was a political earthquake, a total shift in style, beliefs, and what the government should even be, all because of how different these two men were.
And just like that, the future of the country was in the hands of this human dynamo who was only 42 years old, the youngest president ever. The Gilded Age was over. The progressive era had begun, all because of one anarchist and one bullet.
So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? This was a true turning point in history.
What would the 20th century have looked like if that bullet had just missed its mark? What if that incredible force of nature, Theodore Roosevelt, had just remained on the sidelines? It's a question we can never answer.